With California only reporting about two-thirds of their vote, there's millions of votes left to count in this election. And better yet, we have an update as to how it's going in the Senate. The presidency has some moving parts, as well as, of course, the House is super, super close, going either way. So let's break it down. So, for starters, I'm going to invite you guys today to look at what competitive races have not been decided, and there's plenty of them. As you can see here, the highlighted blue and red districts are the ones that are actually competitive and the ones that have not been called until recently. Now, as we know with gerrymandering, hundreds of the 435 representative seats in the House of Congress are not competitive at all. Nobody cares about them because they're already cemented as either very Republican or very Democrat. That being said, there's still fewer and fewer, but still a few dozen seats that are competitive, and we're going to break down exactly what's going on with those. We also have pretty conclusive results out of Pennsylvania for the Senate. Of course, Dave McCormick is senator-elect no matter what Chuck Schumer tries to do to block him from Senate orientation, believe it or not. But we also have conclusive results out of Arizona. Unfortunately, Kerry Lake, with 91% of the vote, is down 2.2, so that's virtually impossible for her to make up at that point. And then Nevada's already been called for Jackie Rosen, about 1.6 points ahead of Sam Brown, again, underperforming the presidential candidate at the top, Donald Trump. Now, we do have all these races to somewhat cover, but I'll try to be brief, and let's get right into it. As you may see to the right of the screen here, we have 216 Republican seats already called for the GOP. As you guys should know, you need, I think it is 218 seats to have a majority in the first place. So Republicans are just a few calls away from getting the House of Representatives, which again is super important because once you have the House, the Senate, and the presidency, you have a full sweep of governmental control for Trump, plus the popular vote mandate, by the way. Anyways, now to get into the news here, we have 10 seats that have not been called. Republicans are leading Democrats by a net 7, which is somewhat hearkening to the result we have right now in the current Congress with Mike Johnson. But we do have several uncalled races that are really vital, and most of these are out of California. But to start with Alaska, we have Mary Patola, who's running against Nick Begich, and that's a very close election, of course. So, stopping by Alaska, Nick Begich is currently up as a Republican in that state by 4 percentage points, which is about 10,000 votes against Mary Patola, the Democrat. Now, keep in mind that there's still 29% of the vote out, so there's several thousands of votes that could go either way. But you could surmise it to mean that generally Alaska's Republican, so whatever remaining amount ought to be pretty conservative. So even though, yeah, of course, Begich is not completely a shoo-in yet, I'd say he's more than likely going to win at this point, and that's just pretty evident by the lack of news coverage on that race. So more than likely, we're gonna have a Republican seat here, a flip really in in Alaska. So that would take you to 217, frankly. So again, that's one seat away from a majority outright. Now we have Juan Ciscomani, who's in my district, my Congressman Ciscomani, in CD6 Arizona. So let's look at that. So CD6 for the Republicans is a very tepid sort of flip here, or not even flip, but retaining of the seat. It's really close either way is what I'm getting at. And so if you look at even 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time of November 11th, about a week away from the election itself, you'll see that with 91% reporting, Juan Ciscomani has a lead of 2,100 votes, and he's up by zero point 0.6 percentages over Kirsten Engel. And so that's not the most promising result. Now, granted, I do believe that most of the remaining vote will likely be from the Republican parts of his district, and then he also has a cleavage of Tucson as well, so that's what's dragging him down and giving Kirsten Engel a shot here. She was a professor at my university at Arizona. But anyway, so it seems like Juan Ciscomani is more than likely going to retain the seat, though it is really close, and so we're going to have to stay tuned on that, but that's the update on CD6. Another crazy aside, my the candidate Vince Leach, who I've met before, with 94% reporting, is leading in the state senate for Arizona's 17th district by zero point 0.2 percentages, which is insane. Again, the lead that the Republicans have in the Senate is so slim that if they lose a single election, either in the House or at the Senate level, they lose government control to the Democrat Governor Katie Hobbs, basically. And so that's insane. So they're the final vanguard against complete liberal control. And like we know already, Ruben Gallego basically is already the senator for the next 6 years in Arizona. So that would just make everything worse. So hopefully that does not flip to the contrary. We also have news on AZ1. Obviously, David Schweikart, a lot of scandals with the guy. But basically, they've called the race with over 95% reporting. You have a lead of 17,000 ballots. David Schweikart wins this district 52 to 48 against Amish Shah. So that's great. Because people thought it was going to be a toss-up, but it's looking pretty good. Then now, in more rapid-fire succession, though, let's look at California, where they're only reporting 61% of the vote. You have Josh Harder, who's the incumbent Democrat, I believe, leading Kevin Lincoln by 2.3 or 3.3. Now, Josh Harder's district is already Democrat, like I said, he's the incumbent. But also importantly, the Joe Biden margin of victory was 12.6, Democrat, obviously. So while, obviously the Republican is only trailing by a few points, it's still more than likely going to be the case that the Republican ends up losing this one to the Democrat. So that's not all too good in California. Now, moving on to this big district here, House 13, you have the incumbent John Duarte with 57% of the vote. He's leading currently the Democrat 2.6, which is a pretty good lead, all things considered, because if you look at John Duarte historically, he won by zero point 0.4 in 22, but then also Biden won the district by 11. That being said, Trump is doing several points better than he did in 2020 in the state of California holistically, namely the Latino vote, and obviously Duarte should benefit from those coattails, and he seems like a strong candidate in his own right. So I do think he is projected to retain his seat, but it's not a sure thing, of course, with barely half of the votes even counted in the first place. Jim Costa is up by one with 64% reporting over Michael Mayer. Now, if you look at this race historically, though, with Costa, so California's 21st district is really odd. We have an incumbent that's going for, I think, his sixth or seventh term in the House. Jim Costa over here won in 22 by 8.4, whereas Biden won the district by 20% in 20. So that's very fascinating. What number is closer? The 2020 result, where, again, it's a 20-point margin, slam dunk for Democrats, or will it be closer to this single-digit misery win for Costa in the off year? It's very interesting to me. Now, Costa's not even on the map insofar as like competitive seats. So for the thing to be close now is pretty surprising, actually. Though, again, not that much of the vote is reported. So while it might be closer than usual, and I bet it will, Jim Costa will likely prevail in that district. So moving on to the next one we want to talk about today. You have David Valadeo in prime position over here in the 22nd House District in California, leading by 7 percentages. Estimated vote, though, is only 71%. So, again, liable to change. But, I mean, given the fact that if you look at the result last time, in the case of David Valadeo, he outperformed the Trump margin in 20 by about 16%. So that's pretty phenomenal. And so for that reason, I think I'm pretty confident that he will pull this ahead, though we're not sure. So that's great news for the Republicans. So that's more than likely a flip. I'll give that 80% odds of doing that exactly. So anyway, looking at this House seat, in the 20th is already called. Um, you look at the 47th House District near San Diego, and you'll notice with 82% of the vote in, Dave Min is leading Scott Baugh by 1 point. Now, if we look at the relative apportment, given the last election cycle, we look at Baugh real quick. You'll notice that he was in a race that went to Biden by 20, or sorry, by 11.1, and then went to Katie Porter, who ran for Senate here, by 3.4. So it might be close, but given the fact that Democrats already have the lead and there's still more vote outstanding, that's likely going to be mail-ins. So I'm going to assume that that's going Democrat as well. Michelle Steele seems to be up, and I'm pretty confident she will win as well. She's up by 2.2, basically, with 80% of the vote in. She's a strong candidate in Orange County, California, I believe. So there you go. Another super important race right here. Ken Calvert is an incumbent. He barely won last time, I believe. If you look at the last result, he won the district by 4.6, and Trump won it by a single point. So I do think he is standing pretty tall here. In fact, when you look at it, he's up by 3 to 4 percentage points in the county, or sorry, the district, with 76% of the vote in, though. So still very much up in the air, but I would give that more or less to the Republican there. So we hold that seat more than likely. But we have some pretty bonkers results out of the 27th district in California. This is a really, really big election, actually. When you look at it, Mike Garcia, the incumbent Republican, is somebody who was running in a pretty blue district, all things considered, against George Whitesides. And he was looking to be in the lead narrowly. But up until like last night, basically, he has been in the lead barely, but now it's been flipping again. He's down by 1.8, looking kind of like the Kerry Lake race, where looked pretty promising at certain points, but not looking like it's going to end up so well. And there's 84% of the vote in. Now, the remaining vote is probably not too friendly to Mike Garcia, so he's more than likely going to lose this election, unfortunately. Now, Mike Garcia is a Teflon Don. He obviously overperformed the Trump-Biden margin in 20 by looking at the last election cycle in 22. He outperformed that by about 18.8 percentage points. So that's phenomenal, but that still cannot cut it for this election for whatever reason. And so that's really, really, really bad. All right, so then you have House 49. Mike Levin, the incumbent Democrat, is leading right now by 3.4. That's with 80% of the count in. Matt Gunderson at 48.3. That's going to be pretty close. As you can see here, this election was actually leaning liberal to begin with. And so for it to be this close is actually a pretty good sign for Mike Levin to, of course, be fighting for his political life here with only a few points up in California. That's actually pretty good for a Republican, all things considered. But even still, he's more than likely going to retain the seat, albeit by a slimmer margin. So call it emasculating, but it's still a win for them. Democrats, that is. Now, I think that covers it. And for a lightning update, like the video, subscribe if you haven't yet, and comment down below if you think that these are any surprising flips. But anyway, in news, I actually just saw that CNN called Colorado's 8th district for a flip for the Republican Party. Gabe Evans, I think he's a veteran, beat Yadira Caraveo. So that's pretty impressive. Very narrowly, but he beat her. That's amazing because she was leading the whole time up until now, but that's remarkable. Given that it just gave you a pretty succinct run through as to what's going on with the race when it comes to the House, the Senate, and the presidency. Obviously, there's appointments going on. Lee Zeldin for EPA. We had Susie Wiles for Chief of Staff, Stephen Miller for Deputy Chief of Staff, perhaps, stuff like this. But we'll get into that in another video, of course. But I will tell you that let's just project the next 10 seats. Again, 209 for Democrats thus far, 216 called for Republicans. You need 218 to control the majority of the House of Representatives. So let's look at the remaining 10 and we'll see if we can call them either way. So just guessing right now, I will tell you that my prediction is that we'll flip Alaska. So that's 217 for Republicans. Siskamani retains his spot. That's 20. That's 217. Josh Harder wins his spot. We're still 217. John Duarte, keeps his spot 217 still. Jim Costa, we don't flip that probably. So we're 217. Incumbent Garcia loses, so we could be down at 216 in that case. Ken Calvert will win though probably, so that's 216 still. Michelle Steele, she'll stay. Scott Baugh, that's maybe Democrat at that point, and then Yadira Caraveo puts us at 217. So it's looking really close either way. That being said, we do have some more toss-ups that we haven't gotten into today, but these are such close margins that we can't really call them either way. So, for example, Marionette Miller Meeks in House 1, so District 1 in Iowa, she won her election in 2020 by, I believe, 4 votes, like literally 4 votes out of hundreds of thousands, of course. Now, Miller Meeks is up by 0.2 percentages, less than 1,000 votes with 99% of the vote in. So if you count her in part of the majority, then obviously it's looking better. So, I mean, I'm pretty confused as to how to call it when it comes to who's going to win the House. My final prediction is going to be that we will probably, and by we, Republicans, will win the House by a few seats, and that's it. So maybe 220 seats overall for Republicans. And so this is not the best result. Obviously, I was predicting more pickups. If you look here, I was predicting 229 actually for the Republicans in my other map right before the election. So I probably highballed them by, 6 or 7 seats. But anyway, I was otherwise accurate, and we'll see. Obviously, gerrymandering ever since 2020 has basically made it so that illegals count as constituents. Constituents. And so that's really bad for the census. So anyways, I'll look into that and for another video, more topics on the way. So that was your updated 2024 election news. Gotcha. I'll see ya. Bye. Adios, I mean, whoops.